In this video, what I'm going to be talking to you about is using and integrating evidence in your analytical text response essay. And for the purposes of this video, I'll be referring to Macbeth, which we study in Year 11. Before we actually talk about your essay, let's consider this analogy. In a court of law, lawyers need to make points. They need to put forth arguments, and they need to present evidence to the court, to the judge, and to the jury in criminal cases. Now, in these situations, the lawyer doesn't just plonk a piece of evidence on a table in front of the judge or the jury. They actually have to use it to explain how their point is relevant. And they also have to explain how their evidence actually proves their point. Now, if we use this analogy and we apply it to essay writing, it's basically the same thing. We can't just throw evidence in there. We need to be able to choose the most relevant, strong evidence for our purposes, and we also need to be able to explain it well, to show the reader how our point is being supported by the evidence. So let's talk about using evidence first of all. Why do you need to do it? That's because in analysis, what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to show an understanding of something by explaining what different parts mean and how they work together. Whether you're talking about a car engine, or maybe a play in sports. Whether you're talking about a text, a film, a poetry, or even something in theatre. In order to show an understanding of something, you need to be able to analyze the different parts, the meaning of the different parts, and how they work together in order to convey something. So, in a text response essay, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to explain how or why something is the case in the text. How or why one character is more to blame than the other for what happens in the text. Or, how and why the creator communicates something to the audience. How and why Shakespeare, for example, is trying to show us something about human nature. Now, it's not enough to have a logical point. It's not enough to use logical reasoning. You can't show your understanding without evidence. If you do so, you're only conveying an opinion. So let's consider this scenario again. If the lawyer just plonks a bit of evidence on the table in front of the judge or the jury and doesn't explain its relevance, doesn't explain how it proves their point, then it's not that the evidence in itself is useless, but the lawyer isn't doing a very good job. So let's talk about what counts as evidence. Firstly, quotations in context. We all know this. Something a character says or does can be used as evidence. Also, the narration itself, how it's narrated by the creator, including figurative language and other types of description. In a play, stage directions can also be used as evidence. And any other text within the narrative itself can be used as evidence. For example, in the narrative, we might be presented with a diary written by one of the characters. Even though that doesn't really strictly fit into the categories of the first and second points, it is still text within the narrative. It still can be used as evidence. You can also describe events, instances, moments, and circumstances in the actual text itself. While you're not necessarily quoting something, you do need to make sure that you explain those events, instances, moments, or circumstances in a detailed manner that actually shows their relevance to the point that you're trying to make. And sometimes even relevant contextual information can also be counted as evidence. For example, what the audience at the time may have thought because of their views and values in that particular part of history. So let's talk now about integrating evidence into your writing. Here's an example from Macbeth. Macbeth is worried about where the news has come from and how the witches know that he is going to be the Thane of Cawdor and king. Say whence you owe the strange intelligence. Now here are the good points about this example. There's a clear description of the context, so we know what's going on here. And the evidence here is actually relevant. We can use this to support whatever point this person is making. And there is some analysis, but it's not exactly clear. You can see in this instance that this person has kind of done the whole lawyer plonking the evidence in front of the judge and jury without really explaining how it's relevant. Kind of just inserted it there. It's also not really part of the sentence in and of itself. It's just attached to the tail end. So how can we improve this? Here's an example. Macbeth's worry about the source of the witches' prophecy is clear when he asks them where they obtained their strange intelligence. In this example, what I've done is I've actually cut the phrase just to the key two words, strange intelligence, and I've actually integrated it into the sentence. So it's not just tagged on at the end, but it's actually part of the overall sentence. Here's another example. As the witches leave, Macbeth desperately asks, "Say whence you owe this strange intelligence." Pretty much the same thing, except I've decided to include the entire quote there. Okay? So let's move on to talking about how to actually analyze and use evidence, how to actually explain it, rather than just putting it there and kind of giving the reader a chance to actually see our understanding. So, as the witches leave, Macbeth desperately asks, "Say whence you owe this strange intelligence." The green text is the evidence. It's the quote from the play that we can use. The blue part here is the analysis, the explanation of the relevance and the importance of this evidence, an explanation of what it means. As the witches leave, Macbeth desperately asks, "Say whence you owe this strange intelligence," demonstrating both an eagerness to know more, but also hesitancy over the nature of the knowledge. In the blue, what I'm doing is I'm explaining what this evidence actually shows us about Macbeth in this point in time, not just assuming that the audience will pick up what I'm thinking. Implicitly, the analysis focuses on Shakespeare's use of the word strange. So what I'm actually doing here implicitly is analyzing the use of that word. I'm taking a part of this evidence and explaining what it actually shows. Here's another very similar example. As the witches leave, Macbeth desperately asks, "Say whence you owe this strange intelligence." Now I'm being a bit more explicit here. The use of the word strange shows that, though he is eager to know more, he is worried about the source of their knowledge. This is ideally how you want to use evidence and how you want to integrate it into your writing. So now, you might want to try it for yourself. Here's another example. Lady Macbeth wants Macbeth to become king, but is fearful that his conscience will interfere with his ambition, and that he is too caring and gentle to firstly murder Duncan as well as being a successful king. "Yet do I fear thy nature, it is too full of the milk of human kindness." Again, we've got all the tools here, we've got all the building blocks, but let's see how we can put it together so that it's used properly and also integrated properly.